Okay, so welcome back everyone to another Minds Clarity podcast episode. We're here with Jem for the second time. And for those of you who are new to the podcast, Jem and I are good friends and we met back in Kathmandu. I went to Kathmandu seeking spiritual practice or spiritual questions that I wanted to answer. Jem, I'll invite you to share a little bit of your reason why you came to Kathmandu. And yeah, I think he's a wonderful practitioner. He's got much more experience than I do, and I usually go to him with Dharma questions. So, Jem, welcome. I'm really happy to have you back here.
Thank you, Tony. I'm happy to be here. Um, I love Kathmandu. It's um, it's a very rich place for the Dharma, and it's also the home of my two most important teachers. One of them um, had a funeral, which I attended last time, which was when I was there with you, and he lived there for many, many years. And the other one is still teaching. So, very important place for me. And the stupa is very important to me as well.
Yeah, Stupa is it's a very special structure or a very special pilgrimage destination, I guess you could call that. And would you mind sharing the names of those teachers with the audience?
So, my teacher who passed was Kempo Tsultrim Jamso Rinpoche, and he sang many songs of realization. And the other one is Mingyur Rinpoche, who we talked about last time.
Of course, yeah. I think that's a great point in common between us is that we're both followers of Mingyur Rinpoche. Actually, right now I'm calling you and hopping on this call from also Ling Monastery in Kathmandu. And for those of you who don't know, this is Mingyur Rinpoche's monastery. And we had some teachings. We actually closed an event this morning. Like today was the closing day of one of his events. And yeah, I think we both agree he's an extraordinary teacher.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And well, Jem sent me a teaching that he wrote. And Jem, do you think it's a good idea if I read it and then we can have it as a topic of conversation for today?
Yeah, I don't mind whatever you think.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead. I think it's a better idea if you read it. What do you think?
Uh, no, I can't do that.
So should I read it or should we just talk about the
Maybe
topic that comes to mind?
let's just talk about what comes to mind. Maybe the first sentence.
Okay.
Can you remind me
Okay.
what it is?
For a sentence, like in a sentence, say what comes to mind.
No, the first sentence of the uh, little quote.
Okay. Okay. So the first sentence is about assuming that our perceptions of reality are the ultimate truth. Okay. I think, of course, it's already um, a profound sentence, I think. Because when we talk about the ultimate truth, at least from my limited understanding of Buddhism, is that is emptiness. Usually the the concept that comes as the description of the ultimate truth. And I might have talked about this last time we spoke, but I a teaching by the Dalai Lama keeps coming to mind, where he says that emptiness is not nothingness. that it points at the ultimate reality, and that emptiness is that things do not exist as they appear. And I think those are three key sentences that, to me, they have guided me through understanding at least a little bit about what emptiness is. But yeah, I guess that's what springs to mind after reading that first sentence.
Okay. The the point is that there are three stages. The stage of no analysis is the first stage. So without examination. Then the second stage is the stage of slight analysis. So we start to think, we start to question, we start to
Okay.
examine. And the third stage is the stage of complete and thorough examination. So if we talk about the first stage, this is the stage that um, most people have never thought about their perceptions. They've never thought about the nature of reality. They've never heard of emptiness. They've never considered any of these teachings about what's real, what's true philosophically. And
Mm.
in the Buddhist teachings, they talk about wisdom, which is connected to reality or truth or um, the way things really are. And then the name they have for that is emptiness. But it's really useful, I think, to approach emptiness in terms of these three stages. The stage of no examination, slight examination, and thorough examination. So that's what the
Okay.
first sentence is about, is saying we assume that our perceptions are real. We don't even think that. We just assume that. It's like not even a consideration or a question, are they real or not?
Right.
It's just
You've never stopped
completely
to question, never stopped to ask.
exactly.
Okay.
It's just assumed or taken for granted. Yeah.
Okay. And that from, yeah, again, that's the cause of suffering, right? Not seeing things for what they are. And yeah, I think it sounds like three very important steps to take, right? Like an invitation for everyone to question a little bit, or at least to start with the process of examination.
Yeah. Well, as soon as you start with that question, is what you see real? That's the beginning of the process. Because I think most people would answer honestly, no, I don't think my perceptions are real. But until we start to
You think
question,
most people would say that? Yeah.
uh,
I don't,
well, you could say sometimes, like sometimes I see things that aren't there, or I hear things that aren't said, or I interpret
mm,
things that aren't meant. And there's a uh, like an illusory quality to our experience in the world of mistaking things to be one thing when they're actually something else.
okay. But then there are different levels of perception, right? Because the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about things being real or things not being real, I look around where I am in this room. And for example, I'm holding a pen now. And I guess going back to what I'm wondering, and I would like to hear your thoughts on this. But there are different levels of perception of me looking at a pen. For example, I could think that the pen is real, maybe, because we can all see it now. It's in the video right now, and if you're just listening to the audio, I'm holding a pen in my right hand. But then I can make up stories about a pen. Maybe it's a pen that I really like. Maybe it's a pen that I don't like. Maybe I find it useful. I find it positive sensations, negative sensations, or neutral. So I don't know. That's just something that came to mind of the different degrees of perception of maybe saying is the pen ultimately real, and then there are layers of perception that are illusory, or is everything illusory altogether?
Mm. I don't know. Uh, the pen is a concept. For example, if a dog looks at a pen, the dog doesn't have the same concept. Or say like a mosquito that doesn't have the concept of a pen.
Okay.
Our
Yeah.
experience of concepts is is usually not analyzed and not recognized. We just have concepts, uh, and they come automatically, and we don't question them. So
Okay.
when we're, it's good that you mentioned suffering, because when we are not aware of reality, that causes suffering. And our concepts cause us a huge amount of suffering. In fact, you could say probably most of the suffering in the world, in our life, in our experience, day to day, moment to moment, is caused by concepts. That in itself, that fact in itself is an enormous thing to realize.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree that a lot of, I don't know if we could even say, I don't know in the Buddhist concept what it is taught, but even if all of our suffering is caused by concepts, maybe. For example, I'm trying to think of a more like day to day example, and maybe we can follow that thread. I came to also link today on a motorcycle. Here in Kathmandu, there's an app where you can schedule a ride and a motorcycle, like a person comes and picks you up. And I came all the way from the stupa. By the way, I was in the boat and at stupa, all the way to Ling, which is across the city. Like it's like 30 to 40 minute ride. And it's the second time today that I make like a pretty long, you could say, or I guess in my standards, a pretty long bike ride. And I was tired arriving at the like today at Ling. And I was wondering, of course, I fell back to my practice and in essence is resting with things as they are and trying to let things be and watching the mind that is like Mingi Rinpoche says, pala 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 yada yada yada, complaining about the bike ride.
Mm.
Um, but how do you think we can ground the idea of concepts causing suffering to this idea of a bike ride?
So the pain of the body can be interpreted as good or bad. For example, if you're having a massage, you have the same kind of level of pain, but you think, oh, this pain is wonderful. This is really, really good for me. It's really making me healthy. And then when you have the the pain, for example, walking on stones. It's the same as reflexology, but you think it's bad. And you know, I really want to stop this sensation. It's not helping me. It's bad for me. And so this the layers that we put on top conceptually of our feelings and experiences and perceptions that happen so quickly we don't even notice. And that's where all of our triggers and our habitual patterns just play like a an automatic record. And that's where our
Sure.
suffering comes from when we think things um, are bad for us, and then we have aversion, and then we have fear, and if we think things are good for us, then we have attachment, and then we have hope. So it's always about
Mm.
these kind of duality of pushing away or chasing after, and that
So attachment and aversion, right?
attachment
The
and aversion is the essence of all of our suffering.
I like Mingyur Rinpoche's way of teaching of pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he
And he
also
said,
has an analogy of getting stuck in a spider web. It's like you're, or was it a spider web or something similar in the sense that you try to get out of it, and I would assume that that's aversion, or you're clinging to the idea of getting out of that situation in where you're stuck in, but you end up getting more stuck by just the act of trying and and I don't know how I connected that to what you said about hope and fear. And
yeah, because our concepts um, are what creates the hope and fear. And our concepts, if you like, using the analogy of the gas pedal in a car and the brake pedal, the engine is the ignorance. So that our concepts are actually based in not realizing the truth of how things really are, which is that they are empty of concept. They're beyond our ability to to hold a concept about them. So they are beyond concept. That's the
okay,
opposite of ignorance. When we think that our concepts are real, which you could say ultimately real, if we think that they are ultimately real, then we will have very strong hope and fear, attachment and aversion based on that belief or that assumption or that clinging.
okay. So maybe on the bike ride to also link today, is it me thinking that the act of a bike ride or the pain in my back from a bumpy road, thinking that all those things are real, that is the cause of me suffering during the bike ride? Would that be something accurate to say?
Okay, so you could have the pain in your body, but you don't necessarily have to have the suffering. You could
Okay.
feel happy about the pain. I know that sounds strange, like who wants pain? But you could be so focused and so excited on the reason that you're making this bike ride and the things that you're looking forward to that you're waiting for to see at the destination
Okay.
that you would think
But that is related to letting go of the concepts. of being on a bike ride? Because I would imagine like ultimately, and this is of course my limited interpretation of of it's always complicated to talk about non-conceptuality through concepts. It's the great paradox of
Yeah.
the spiritual path. But I'm wondering
Letting
if
go.
letting
Letting
go.
go is it depends on realizing that your concepts are your choice, they're your creation, they're your mind. You don't
Yeah,
you don't have to believe everything you think. So if you think this is bad, and then you feel the suffering of the aversion, because aversion is suffering, right? Can we
yeah,
agree on that?
yeah, yeah. Like
So
me thinking, not wanting to be on the bike ride or wanting it to end. Of course, I
yeah.
think that's not
So
a nice situation to be in.
if you really think about, there's a difference between pain and aversion to pain. And the pain itself is not the suffering. The suffering is the aversion. If you
Okay,
actually really look at the suffering, it's your reaction.
okay. So
And
like the
your
layers on
reaction
top.
is what you put on top. And your reaction is based on your belief that this is bad.
Okay. So it all boils down to letting go.
Yes, exactly. Well, you need
And
to
why are there so many books on Dharma philosophy?
because we're
That's
not,
I gotta be honest, that has been in the past, like I'm relatively new to this world, right? And but I've been studying a lot. And over time, I realize the essential teachings are so simple. And I always come back to the question, why are there so many so many commentaries and so many texts and so many
yeah.
if it boils down to letting go?
Letting go is a practice. And the practice um
Yeah.
is very, very simple, but very mm, almost like the opposite of what we're used to.
Yeah. And then why do you think there are still so many concepts to explain that letting go is a practice?
Well, if you were a very simple person and you were told, just let go of your concepts, you might be able to do it, but you might need some more rationality for how that actually reduces your suffering. Because there's, like you said earlier, there's levels of perception. So there's levels of our mind conceptual patterns that run very deeply and very in a very obscure way that we can't see. So in order to really let go, I think we need to see our automatic patterns. We need to see how they operate, when they operate, where they operate, and we need to see our role in all of that. That we're actually doing it to ourselves.
Yeah. I've heard of one of the ways of describing meditation as it being familiarizing yourself with the mind.
Yeah,
So do you think that's an accurate word of the practice of familiarization with the mind?
absolutely.
Because then I think I've also noticed there's a just a natural tendency of our nature to realize things just by watching or just by observing or just by resting with the mind. And Mingyur Rinpoche teaches that wisdom is one of the aspects of our own nature. So we don't have to create it really. It's just a matter of letting it manifest.
Yeah.
So yeah. So coming back to the familiarization word of that, like meditation being a way to, or a practice to get familiar with the mind. I think, yeah, it's a great place to let your nature manifest by itself, I guess.
I had something really great the other day. They said, if you look at all traditions of um, all paths, all countries, um, they all basically have this central idea in two words: know thyself.
Know thyself. But in Buddhism, there's no self. So who do you know?
Well, the self is empty, but it's not nothing.
The self is empty, but not nothing. I think it was one of your on one of the messages we exchanged. There was a quote, and maybe you can remind me of who it was from, that said some, I'll paraphrase, I'll try my best to say what I remember, right? But it was something like, we are the sky and everything else is just the weather.
Yeah, I know.
And that was, is it
Pema
Pema
Chudra.
Chuchu? So maybe it's a matter of realizing the me is not this body sitting in this chair and also laying in Kathmandu, but the me is bigger than that or
Yeah,
more
exactly.
spacious than that. Because I've heard of of some cultures or some that describe it as oneness or, but I don't really like that word because it's, I feel like one, and I think this might be like a philosophical way of approaching it, but one implies another. So I don't think you can even talk about one. What do you think?
Well, they talk in Buddhism, they talk about non-duality. So they don't say it's one, they just say it's not two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate way to put it, I guess. That's why it resonates with me so much, Buddhism.
Mhm.
Yeah, interesting. So coming back, before we were talking about the pain, right? And I want to bring it back to the example of the bike ride, just because I hear so many people complaining often about traffic and
Yeah.
just transportation overall. So I'm trying to make it relatable to anyone who's listening to us right now. And we were talking about this, like the pain, how it's our own stories that we make them, like make the pain good, make the pain bad, how a massage can be good pain when you put it in the right story or in the right context. So the word comes to mind of the word relationship. How, like it's a matter of how we relate to the experience, right?
Mm.
And within that relationship of us, or the me and the experience, that's where I guess that's where there's the opportunity for transformation, I think, of changing the way we relate to things.
Yeah, exactly. The way that we relate to things is changeable. And the process for transforming is to see that we are responsible for it. Like know thyself and then recognize that you don't have to um, follow the habitual pattern anymore. The way that you've always related to a particular thing, you can change that, and you can change it. uh, Once you recognize that you can change it, then it's quite easy to change.
Yeah. And it's impermanent, permanent and permanence
Yeah,
and change.
yeah,
I think one of the things that might enslave us or restrict us the most is thinking that things are static and permanent.
definitely.
Because if you're in a situation and you're suffering because of pain or discomfort, because of a traffic jam,
Mm,
it's always, I feel personally, I think it's a very powerful way to work with it, to remember impermanence, change, and even within the same, in this example of a traffic jam or the bike ride, even within the same ride, you can have many different ups and downs, and just witnessing that, I think is a very liberating thing. Yeah.
I think it's
That
beautiful.
ends up transforming the relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. The My experience of being on a bike in Kathmandu is is quite uh it's like a te Dharma teaching in a way because of all the drivers, they're so patient. They're so kind. They just do not stress. It's somebody completely randomly walks in front of them, they just wait. They just stop and wait.
They don't even complain. It's yeah. They're my role models.
Yeah.
Nepali people overall. Today's Shivaratri, so the birthday of Shiva.
Oh wow.
And it's uh I think it's a holiday. You can say it's in Hinduism mostly. And throughout the day, like I spent, I think maybe a couple of hours or more than an hour on a bike today on total.
Mm.
And kids, there's something I'm finding out today. I didn't know it happened. Like kids come out of their homes and grab a string or a rope, and they block the roads, and they have a like a like a plate with an image of Shiva. I think some flowers, and they ask for money. I don't know what they use the money for, but it's funny because they block the roads and they ask for money. And what you're saying today, like drivers, like patiently, sometimes they even hand out a few rupees and give them some money and then just patiently wait. But I think today, within that almost 2 hours of bike ride, we were stopped by tens, like more than like a dozen of kids with strings.
Wow.
And I think it's easier when they're kids, right? Like it's more understandable to be patient with
It's
kids who are
sweet.
asking for money.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it goes back to, I think, the example of patience, right? And especially in Nepal, how drivers are exceptionally patient, I think, and they're not getting angry. And
Yeah. There's a wonderful understanding of impermanence, which is really helpful in those situations. You just have to really be confident that the traffic will keep going eventually, you know?
it'll change. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you think, like now that we're uh yeah, I think we're getting close to wrapping up. Like I propose like drifting into the topic of a practice technique or practice methods, um to maybe share with the people who are listening what we can do on our day to day. Like I brought a lot the example of transportation because I know that that's a lot of what people struggle with the most, and we all need to move around from one place to another somehow. So what do you think are different methods you would recommend people? Um, I know you mentioned practice, and I agree it's very important. But maybe how to make it consistent, or yeah, just methods or techniques overall that come to mind.
Thank you. Because this topic is meant to be applied. It's actually not really beneficial until it becomes practiced or practical application. And it's meant to reduce our problems. It's meant to reduce our suffering. So um, I'm really glad that you keep bringing it back to our to our experience. So in our experience, we have ups and downs, and when you feel good, I would recommend that you don't cling too much to it. You know that it's impermanent. You know that it's just part of life that it will come and go, and don't be too attached to hoping it lasts. Because when things don't last, then we suffer if we're too attached. If we're in a way assuming that things are permanent somehow. And and then the opposite side of that is when we're actually experiencing something that we don't want, to also remember impermanence, that things will change. It's not going to be like this for very long. It's not going to be like this forever. And then that somehow lightens it, because when we assume that things are just permanently bad, that is it's a really great suffering.
Yeah, it's a pretty tough place to be, thinking
Mm,
that you're not having a good time and thinking it'll last forever.
exactly.
Yeah, it's not a good place to be. Interesting. Yeah, and impermanence, I really like how we are coming back full like circle with how we started talking about the three steps, right? Of going from no analysis to slight analysis to complete and thorough examination. And that we started with talking about ultimate reality, right? So it's a very like broad and really hard to grasp. Um, so I guess how the dots are connecting in my mind are like we started from that openness where that the trying to explaining concepts was not conceptual. And that to me is an invitation to everybody listening out there to at least start questioning, right? Like you walk around life and you experience things and at least ask, okay, are things around me real? Like look at your perceptions. I think it's a good invitation. Then we drifted onto the more into the sensations and how we experience things, and then we add layers of concepts on top. And I kept kept bringing back the examples of the bike ride. Um, but yeah, and how concepts can be the layers on top that cause our suffering. And then we start talking about practice. So I think we're now bringing it back to remembering impermanence of a
Yeah.
good method for practicing. And this reminds me of a teaching. And again, I keep paraphrasing. I know it's difficult to talk about Buddha teachings and like it's important not to paraphrase too much, but I think it's important at least I make the disclosure. But I think the Buddha said something like just like the elephant's footprint is the greatest, impermanence is the greatest, referring to the practice or the teaching and what to remember.
Yeah.
So I think remembering impermanence. I think it's a wonderful, like, yeah, advice for practice for everyone listening out there.
Definitely. And it brings a lot of relief from suffering to just remain as aware of that as you can.
Okay. And what is a way that you like find yourself telling yourself, wait, remember, this is impermanent, if you mind sharing?
Well, you can see it. You can see it play in front of you um, every second. Every breath that you take is impermanent. Every um, like now, right now it's raining outside. Every drop of rain is impermanent. It's just
Yeah.
constantly changing, moment by moment on on every level. Like, you know, the atoms are changing, the molecules are changing, the the cells in your body are changing, and so on and so on. It's on every level. It's just never, nothing's permanent for even the tiniest amount of time.
That's true. Okay. Awesome, Jim. Um, yeah, I
Great.
think that's a great way to approach the closure of this episode.
Thank you.
Remember impermanence and change. And I would like to, yeah, leave it at least some space for you to share with any remaining thoughts that you would like to share. And what would, if people out there are just going to, or like me, like we're all going to join our daily lives after this session or this episode, what should we all remember or take with us after this conversation?
Um, take take whatever you find helpful and be happy. Look at what your real causes of suffering are and try to reduce those, but um, not in a habitual way, more in a wise way to get down to the real root.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jem. You heard it from Jem. Be happy and look at the causes of suffering. I
Yeah,
love it.
great. And thank you so
Awesome,
much
Jem.
because it's my pleasure really to have these conversations with you, and I really hope we can meet again soon.
Of course, the pleasure is mutual. Well, see you guys and have a good one, Jem. I'll see you all soon.
Awesome. Thank you.